Syria has got rid of cruel thugs in the Assad dynasty, but it has left a struggling state in its wake. Turkey and Israel are hovering around the wounded country. What are the Israeli aims? Is it a third front or just another scene in one big war? Join me, Jan Darash, for How We Got Here.
The fall of President Bashar Al-Assad's regime has emboldened Israel to advance military objectives and expand its security structure. As early as on December 8th, the day when the Assad government fell, Israel carried out Operation Bashan Arrow. Much of Syria's arsenal was turned to dust. Military bases, including air bases and aircraft stationed therein, were taken out, air defenses outdone, weapon depots razed to the ground, naval assets wrecked, and production and development facilities, including for chemical weapons, were destroyed. This move ensured that whoever was in command in Damascus and whatever ideologies they were driven by, Israel could not be immediately attacked. Parallelly, Israel crossed the Middle Eastern Rubicon by ordering its defense forces to capture the area of separation in Syria, a demilitarized buffer zone created under a 1974 ceasefire between Israel and Syria. This sally drew out some condemnation, including from Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Germany, as it was perceived a violation of the 1974 UN disengagement deal that put previous year's Arab-Israeli war to an end. The Israeli military also captured Syria's outpost perched on the side of now snow-dusted Mount Hermon, a peak rising over 2,800 meters above sea level and the highest mountain of the eastern Mediterranean coast. The Israeli intrusion is expected to help disrupt Iran's ability to smuggle weapons through Syria to Hezbollah, which is Tehran's proxy in Lebanon. Although official Israeli statements regarding the operation portrayed it as a temporary effort to improve the country's defensive position and safeguard its border communities, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly declared that the Golan Heights would remain part of Israel for eternity. His government has already stamped a €11 million worth scheme to double the Israeli population there. This is Trump Heights, one of the settlements in the Golan Heights set to redevelop.
In the northern Golan, we have much less population, and if we look at Trump Heights right here, this area has only 4,000 Jews living out of 21,000 residents in our regional council. So our main focus in the next 5 years is to grow the population in the northern Golan.
According to the community leader, Trump Heights are to double its population, with 99 families expected to move into new homes in 3 years, many more spacious and modern than the trailers occupied by current dwellers. The Golan Heights today is home to around 50,000 people, evenly split between Jews and Druze.
I'm joined today by Elias Dakhnavi from the Abhasid Foundation Fund and from the Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań. Welcome once more to the programme.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm really glad to be here again.
So are we. What's the Israeli war aim, the operational aims in Syria at the moment? How did it get there?
Well, to probe this issue, it's better if we take a brief look into the history to see what happens and how Golan Heights fell into the hands of the Israeli government. Well, first of all, there was a short war in 1967 between Israel and some Arab states. And after the war, because Syrians were also involved in that war, after the war, Israel could take control of the Golan Heights. Then, after the Yom Kippur War in 1973 and 1974, there was an agreement between the Syrian and Israel government brokered by Henry Kissinger, the then Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the United States. And they established a buffer zone, no man's island, between Israel and Syria. And they started to fortify some specific military camps in order to have a control over the buffer zone. And the United Nations had a control over this no man's island. So after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, we are having a void of power. That means no one knows what's happening in that area. And we can see that Golan Heights threats directly the northern cities of Israel. So the security of this region is very important to the central government of Israel. At the moment, the Israelis know that there might be some, attacks, some acts of sabotage from the Israel, not from the Israel, from the Syrian rebel groups or liberated groups, whatsoever they call them. They are not concerned about them, but they are concerned about the void of power, because there is no monitoring authority near the borders. So anything might happen. That's why they're advancing to take control of this region. So this can be one of the most important reasons of the Israel advancement into the Syrian soil and territory.
Yeah, so if you lose the Golan Heights, basically you lose Israel because of the high ground to the north.
Well, it is a high ground to the north, and if you lose that, strategic point, then the northern part of Israel can be threatened directly by different factions and different groups. It's not only the remnants of ISIS. There might be the Iranian proxies, there might be Hezbollah, there might be Al-Qaeda remnants in that area. So it can be anyone or any groups or any governmental dependent militia groups that can threaten the security of Israel.
It's obviously a very key terrain in Israeli security. Is Israel ever tempted to go further, or would you say it's just going to secure these key strategic points along its northern border? You mentioned this vacuum, this power vacuum within Syria that we have at the moment. Great powers tend to go and as far as they can. Turkey to the north, Israel to the south. Iran, for example, seems to be knocked out of the play at the moment. Syria seems to be ripe for some sort of dismemberment, some partition.
Well, it really depends on the political strategies of the players involved in Syria. Because as we have seen, for instance, the Turks, they're using a geopolitical diplomatic approach when it comes to their role in Syria. The Iranians are shocked at the moment. They're trying to replan and see how they can penetrate again into the structural nuances of the Syrian government. Yet they don't have the government to be elected, let's say. But Israelis have been really explicit. They have explicitly used their own army to come into Syria. Turks have used HTS. Iranians have been using their proxies. The Americans have been using courts in the northern east part of Syria. And none of these players have used their armies to play. But when it comes to Israel, well, it's a little bit controversial. And this controversy has its roots in some kind of legal and diplomatic controversies. Because there have been UN resolutions, 242, that was ratified, and the international community and the United Nations Security Council has explicitly asked Israel to withdraw its forces from the occupied Golan Heights. That's why France has asked the Israeli government to withdraw its forces. Even the United States, before 2019, didn't recognize the occupation of the Golan Heights. So that is, when it comes to Israel, we have this controversy.
But that's also a sign of the weakness of the international legal structure. We can't enforce these UN resolutions against Israel, nor against anybody else, I suppose.
Well, this is the bitter, pill to swallow, or this is a bitter fact, because in international relations, it's a matter of power. We have international law and we have international relations, but everything just kind of circle around the power. Which player has more power? We have seen that the International Criminal Court in The Hague has accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for war crime. But such postures cannot be, put into action. They cannot be implemented because in international relations we have these equations of power. Syria has the same story. The leaders of HTS or any group that is now leading all the negotiation must design some scenarios for the future. And they have 3 scenarios for the future. If you like, I can explain some of these scenarios. The first scenario is to have an open door policy, not like the Chinese, but in terms of politics, because the Chinese had the same version of open door policy, but for economic reasons. HTS can benefit from this policy for its neighbors, and Israel can be a very crucial neighbor. So they can have this open door policy, start to have negotiation, and this can split to other areas of cooperation. If the Western allies see that Syrian new ruling body is having positive negotiation with Israel, then they might open the doors for diplomacy as well. The second scenario is that have nothing to do with Israel, stay silent and have some negotiations behind the door while rhetorically condemn their action. So still we can see that diplomacy is working here in the second scenario, but they are kind of acting based on their ideology in order to absorb the support from some rich Persian Gulf countries. And the third scenario is to be extremist. It is as clear as water. You stick to your ideology, you stick to what you believe, and explicitly announce that, okay, we have this hostility and we want to stick to our ideology. The third scenario looks like an aberration. I don't think that, an daylight hostility helps Syrian. They don't want any new war. So the new leader of HTS is more likely a man of negotiation or a man of diplomacy.
But we have this period, the fall of the Assad dynasty, a very brutal family that they've gone, and we seem to, are we being lulled into a false sense of security that somehow is going to be okay, and the new government of Syria, such as it is going to be intrinsically pro-Western?
Well,
is that a...
Well, that can be really risky. We cannot have a kind of precise answer to this question.
It's our naivety, I suppose, in terms of...
Because if I say yes or if I say no, it's going to be really reductionist. Because international relations...
more complex.
Because geopolitics, specifically when it comes to the Middle East, is really complicated. As we have spoken behind the scene, this is more like a honeymoon. In Syria, like everybody's probing and scrutinizing everything, like cautiously. They're saying that, okay, what's happening? What's going on? Who is this guy? And they had this relation with ISIS and Al Qaeda in 2016. Now we are entering 2025. For like 10 years ago or 9 years ago, these people were working together, and we're talking about ideology.
Yes,
ideology has this connotation with indoctrination, it has this connotation with extremism. So we have to see how this ideology can turn. But based on the evidences and based on the facts, now they're trying to kind of soften their extremist faces. They're trying to say that we are not like the past. They're trying to introduce a well-structured reputation that, like, we are not like our friends or colleagues or peers. Or
wearing Western suits.
Yeah, wearing a Western suit and a tie. On the surface, yes, that's a signal that, okay, I'm open to negotiation, but we haven't yet had his direct words, because actions speak louder than words.
A final question to you, Dr. Dehnavi. What's the historical precedent for some sort of, to call it stability may be a relative term, but an absence of this brutalized war in the Middle East? It doesn't seem to be working in Gaza, doesn't seem to be working in southern Lebanon, Iran. It's shifting sands all the time, shifting borders.
Well, I can say that this is a game of proxies. My analysis can say that it's a game of proxies, because proxies are really active in this region. The Iranians, for more than 15 years, had established their own proxies in this region. And other players were kind of playing behind the scenes, because no one would kind of imagine that the Turks are also playing with their proxies, because HTS can be regarded, well, they disclaim it, but see where they're receiving their funds from. So other players have also been active and working on their own proxies. That is how proxy shifts and proxy movements work in the Middle East. Like, you invest on a specific ideology at first. Then you invest on specific figures using political psychology. You study the figures, you know how to manipulate them, and then the right move. You talk to the other players. And then there's a consensus. And when there's a consensus, the other players will evacuate the chessboard, because they know that they've already lost.
Yes.
We had the same incidents in some other countries. We had the same situation in Iran. Like, it was a people revolution, people had riots against the king, but there were also some external factors involved. We are having the same thing in Syria. Like, in Iran, people didn't have, I mean, not like Syria, they were not militants. They had guns, but not like in Syria. We also had a kind of transition of power in South Africa. I can say that this is more like a proxy game and a transition of power. It can also be a transition of power. But in South Africa, the previous president didn't flee the country. But the previous dictator in Syria has fled and left the country. And guess where he went?
Yes,
Russia.
Yes. Dr. Dehnavi, thank you very much for a fascinating glimpse into the behind the curtain stuff, which is the more effective and important stuff that's going behind the politics.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a big pleasure for me, and let's hope for peace and stability for this region.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's it. Join us next time, please, for How We Got Here.